With me today is Tracy Lamourie. Tracy is an award-winning publicist, the founder and managing director of Lamourie Media, and the winner of the 2020 Universal Women's Network Women of Inspiration Media Award. And she's also the author of Get Repped, Build Your Brand with Effective Public and Media Relations. Tracy is based in Hamilton, near Toronto in Canada, and spends her time, when not in pandemic lockdown, between Hamilton and Hollywood. In addition to slaying PR and media, Tracy is known worldwide as a human rights activist who campaigned for 20 years and ultimately helped free an innocent man from death row. Tracy also founded the Canadian Coalition Against the Death Penalty. Welcome, Tracy, and thanks for joining me today.
Hi there. Thank you so much for having me. Hello, Brisbane.
Okay, so you didn't wake up one day and, free a man from death row or have a successful public relations and media business. So can you take us back to where it all started?
Absolutely. Long journey. So in my 20s, like a lot of people, I was one of those activists and advocates, still am, who believed you could change the world. And sometimes when you actually think that, and you act in that regard, you do. So yeah, my husband and myself we got married in 1994. He had a little local radio show on University of Toronto radio at the time, which was really activist centered. And he had me come on, and the two of us ended up doing that show along with some other co-hosts. And that was sort of activist stuff, like anti-racism things, so social justice kind of things. And when that show was no more, it was the early days of the internet. We were just looking for ways to continue to have a voice and to speak out about things that we cared about. So my husband learned how to make, a little Netscape page in the early days. And somehow, we were just sharing links about the different social issues that we were concerned with and wanted to help have an impact on. And in searching for links to share and searching for information to share, still in that information gathering mode from had the radio show not too long before. Somehow we came upon this little bit of writing on a site where they were selling, I guess they sold space to prisoners. And Jimmy Dennis, who was innocent on death row, he wrote, "Look, I'm not looking for a pen pal. I'm not looking for a girlfriend. This is the only way I have to reach the world. Hi, can somebody help me? I'm innocent over here. Please, somebody write to us." And, I don't know what it was that struck myself and my husband to actually, like I said, actually write a physical letter and go and mail it to death row. That wasn't anything in our realm before. But I think part of that, I've been thinking on that, and I think part of that reason is because we had that radio show recently. So not just activist minded, but we were information gathering minded still, like what's going on here, right? So we wrote, and he wrote us back 18 pages, closely, written on both sides, sent all the case documentation that he had in his cell at the time. Later, we got much more. Later, we went to the courts and got the whole, transcripts and everything. But even just what he sent originally was enough to go, hold on, wait a minute, this is definitely not right. Like, it was obviously not right. The description didn't fit, all kinds of stuff didn't fit, enough to make anybody go, okay, hold on, we're not going on what someone's saying here. Let's look a little deeper. And the deeper you look, the more disturbing it got. So then we were like, well, what can we do about it? We're not lawyers. I certainly wasn't a publicist. We're not, what can we do? So my husband had learned to make that little website. So he thought, well, why don't I make him a page? And then I learned how to make a press release. I thought, gee, we have to let media know. We were naive enough to think that, if we let media know, they're going to all pay attention. Well, stateside, they didn't, because in those days, it was before all these wrongful conviction podcasts and everything. So you were convicted, that was it. It was really hard to get any attention stateside. But we managed to get some international attention, from Turkey to Australia to the Netherlands to Canada, where other people were willing to look at the justice system there and say, oh, look, is there an issue here? And over the years, we ended up developing a little team of people who cared about it as much as we did, just literally individuals from here and there. And about 2 years in, a law firm out of Washington, Arnold & Porter, that was looking for a case of actual factual innocence. And that does not happen very often. They're like a high-powered Washington firm. And for some reason, they had decided before we ever met them that they wanted to, as well as all the other stuff they were doing, they wanted to do a pro bono case, and they were looking for a factual innocence case. And I guess because of the noise that we had started to make and it was out there, they heard about Jimmy Dennis from a whole bunch of sources. They ended up getting involved. It took 16 years, ultimately, and we stayed until he was released in 2017. And for that whole journey, we talked to him every week. We were the ones that he would call when he had his 15-minute phone call to sell. His family didn't have long distance, so he would call us and we'd deal with whatever had to be dealt with. We'd continue to do the messaging, and also not just us, but a team of people, from about 8 or 9 core members that had that stayed involved. Yeah, and so that was the trajectory. We literally were, and looking back, it was a 20-year campaign, which we didn't see it that way at the time, to free an innocent man from death row. And, all of us together managed to do it. And I think a lot of our role was, just the hope, giving Jimmy a voice and a hope and a way he could speak to the world while the lawyers did all their stuff. So yeah, that's how I got here, and a strange trajectory to, a life I never should have had, which the other, other than the 18 hours a day, like I do a lot of strategy work. I serve clients across industries. It's a lot of hard work and thinking, but there's also VIP parties and travel and all that stuff. And it's a life I never should have been able to access. And I should have just been in sales my whole life, but all of a sudden this weird trajectory happened, and I had that light bulb moment that, hey, because I didn't tell the story, I'm a publicist. So I had a light bulb moment, just a couple of years before Jimmy got out, where I was like, hold on, I'm actually, really good at getting messaging to media. We've been on CNN, on Court TV, on A&E, on, I don't have any education in doing any of this, so I should never have been able to do it. And yet we were able to,
So, you got those files and you thought, hang on a second, something's not right here. But did you believe from day one that he was innocent?
So it's pretty much from the first letter, because we didn't know when we first wrote, we were like, okay, how innocent can this guy be? Like what's the story here? But then when he sent us that first letter back, 18 pages, and again, like anybody, we're ready to be, to not believe it, there's no reason we should believe it, so we were ready to be like, okay, what's this about? That was our first, but it was very obvious from the stuff that he originally, actually the first stuff that he sent, it was enough, like it was literally the description didn't, you were reading the very basic of, hold on, how did this even happen? And then the more and more you read, the less it made sense. So, and then at that point, somebody else got interested enough that they had the wherewithal to go to the courthouse and to spend hundreds of dollars on getting every single, like you buy boxes and boxes of the actual trial transcripts. And then the more you looked at that, again, the more you saw, oh, wow, what he originally told us at the beginning, this is not right at all. And then a law firm like, by the time the law firm came in 2 years in, they weren't messing around. They were not, they were looking for factual innocence. And the more and more they uncovered, the more we knew we were on the right track. But what I'm grateful, because imagine if it wasn't the case. Imagine if we got involved and put everything behind and turned out it was just, no, not, but it was very obvious early in, and to anybody that looked on it. And that's why we were able to develop a little international team, because people who actually looked at it would get really disturbed.
So you mentioned before, it was a sort of a 16-year campaign, and I believe it was 4 years from his conviction being overturned to him being released. So how did you manage to stay the course? Because that is a amazingly long time. That's it. That's just, yeah.
Looking back on it, yeah, somebody asked me that recently, and you know what? I came to the realization when they asked me that. I said I really have to credit Jimmy Dennis for that, because if we think of that in terms of like a work project, which it wasn't, it was an activist campaign of a bunch of activists, but it doesn't matter. A group of people, internationally, people who didn't know each other, who didn't know this person. You know what I mean? So all of us strangers around the world, group of 10, 20 people at different times, who none of us had met through the course of that, we did go and visit Jimmy Dennis. We met him on death row while he was there. But when we all started, for most of those years, everybody was working like hard, writing letters, doing this, doing that, believing in this person and continuing to do actual actions, the result. And why, how do you even, because think about even keeping a work project together that long. And keeping people focused on just a work thing, or, so now when I look back on that, I really think, wow, Jimmy Dennis from his cell, with all the PTSD and stress and trauma that he was dealing with, that he didn't tell us about every single day, because he didn't want to tell us about the day-to-day horrible stuff that was going on, like in the prison. He was just always focused on, let's talk about getting home, let's talk about me getting out of here, let's not getting us all stressed out and worried about, but when I think about it, in the middle of that horrible, he, as traumatizing as it was, he was the one who was able to be like a project manager. He was the center, keeping us all motivated, keeping us all believing, right? Keeping, not believing in him, because we all knew that, but believing in, like, we could do this, like, not just giving up, believing in this, never. And his thing was always never give up. And he's got a song out called Tears this year now. And that's part of it, about this whole year has been traumatizing for everybody. And the theme of it is never give up. But I say in a lot of podcasts too, when he gets down, because he's still struggling and life is still rough and PTSD and all that, I always say, well, we didn't get this far to only get this far, because isn't it funny? He was, a musician going in, about to get a recording contract, and he was stolen away, as he said, for 25 years. He gets out. By the time he gets out, I don't think I've gotten awards yet, but we're like an international PR team, working across industries. So those two people that were just, because I learned how to write a press release, because of him, and
Yeah.
ultimately a few years later I figured out I should really, that's some skill that I could market as a business. But the funny thing in the Rolling Stone, that was crazy too, like, so there we are, we're two like literally entry level salespeople, doing whatever, and activists when we're all 28 when we first write him. And then years later when he finally gets out, I think we're all 48 or 47 at the time when he got 4 years ago now, 47 or whatever it was. And by the time he gets out, we're like an international award-winning PR team, and he's right back in the music studio. So he's a musician. He's my client. So see
It's
how we did
amazing.
that? And now whenever I
Must have
speak
been
about,
fate.
right, in these podcasts, and we always say the story isn't over till he gets a Grammy. We didn't get this far to only get this far. I always tell him.
Yeah,
So
look, I heard there was some Grammy talk. So are you looking forward to a Grammy party?
for sure, I'm saying it's going to happen. It's going to happen because the music is amazing. When he first came out, we always knew he sang, and because music was a huge part of his life. And there was a couple articles recently, like how do you survive death row, and talked about Jimmy and music and how that helped him. But I didn't expect to do that. I mean, I don't know what I expect. I knew he was a good singer. People always spoke about that, But when he came out and did his first song, You Said, and then it was All You Went and Did, and then I Hate the Skin I'm In was a really affecting song about Black Lives Matter and all that stuff last year, and those important discussions. And then this new one, Tears This Year. But I mean, the music is epic. The first one that came out was You Said, and we were like, whoa, okay, that's a whole different story now, And now he's being taken seriously as a musician, not just a story. And he called me the other day and he was like, Tracy, look what happens. You know what? If you Google my name now, go Google my name. And I was like, what? Because his lawyer who got him off death row had called him one day and said, Jimmy, I just Googled your name. Do you know what it said? R&B musician. And
That's so
then that
good.
has the story. But instead of just being death row prisoner, blah, now it's R&B musician with that as the backstory. So we win.
That's amazing. So he's getting basically his identity back, which is so awesome to hear. Yeah, that's awesome.
Huge, yeah.
But speaking about parties, Tracy, I did read one of your articles where you said that a client flew you over to Hollywood. I think it was for an Oscars party. So I wanted to ask you about that because obviously, you're a confident person. You're in PR and media, and you're in that world. But how daunting was it to be attending one of those parties?
You think it should be daunting, but I don't know. Like I guess I think the secret to my success is like I'm neither over impressed or over intimidated, or both ways. I mean, I always say I've lived a weird life. I've been in the halls of power, like in terms of governments. I've been a campaign manager. I've been, literally in the halls of power of countries, and then I've literally walked the walls of death row. I've met celebrities. I've met just people. And so the more you do that, the more you realize, like literally, that nobody is as good as their PR person says in their Hollywood press release. Nobody's that impressive, and nobody is as bad as the worst thing they ever did either. Even the horrible people that we need to be protected from. I shouldn't say not as bad. I should say that there's more. We all say in the anti-death penalty world, everybody is more than the worst thing they've ever done, and that's the same for death row prisoners as it is for us. It doesn't mean we don't need to be protected. They don't need to be punished. Whatever. It just means it's a perspective of there are there's no monsters in the world. We create our monsters. Some people do monstrous things, but we're all human, and we have to find that humanity to understand, why these things happen. So to the end, like, yeah, Hollywood, like, I literally don't remember feeling nervous. I remember
Wow.
more being like, I mean, I was not the first time too. It was hilarious. I was literally trying to do my hair in the Hollywood, in the W Hotel. Oh my God. Because it wasn't quite as bad as this after the COVID, at least it had the red, but, but I mean, I was not, the first time I was not prepared for Hollywood. I was literally trying to, I'm there at the CSW or whatever, buying a curl and trying to get the curls. Hilariously, though, if you said it, I think you said, I don't know if it said in the article, but a year later, the next time I went to Hollywood, it was on a completely different project. And funnily enough, it was with a Canadian client, and she's a celebrity stylist, and she's invented a couple of products called noggin oil for sectioned hair, for section styles. And so we were going there to do a VIP launch party because someone had told her they had given her some space if she wanted to do anything while she was there. And I'm like, you have space in LA? Well, why don't we go there and do the launch party there? And she's like, what, really? And I'm like, Yeah. So who could we get there? We don't know anybody. And I'm like, we'll get people. So we ended up getting like a really good fashion. Oh, this isn't the Hollywood party you're talking. This is the one we had. But the second time, anyway, long story short, is I was with my stylist, and that time, boy, did I look Hollywood the second time, because she had put extensions in my hair, and I had like the curl, oh my goodness. So the second time I was posting, going, see this Beyonce hair? This is how Hollywood does it.
Oh, that's awesome. Second time round, that's all good.
Yeah.
Now, do you think that your balanced approach to, humanity is part of your success?
Yeah, like, I mean, for me, the bottom line is definitely people before, like, not profit. I still have to get my head around the fact that, I run a corporation now that exists to make profit as well as to elevate people's voices. Because I come from activism. What I did was elevating voices. In elevating those voices that I cared about, I learned these skills. Then I started offering those skills, to other people, not necessarily causes, but also small business entrepreneurs, creatives, people who I like, people who are doing neat things, and helping them get their message out, right? So it became just fully like just part of what I do. It's just like fully organic, really.
So have you always been into activism? And, obviously campaigning for anything is sort of tough. So how do you decide what cause, I suppose, you're going to put your voice behind, and how long and how much time you're going to dedicate to that?
So I always have, like, I love that, I blame John Lennon I was 10 years old in 1980 when he died, but I was a huge Lennon fan, and mostly because he also, he spoke about doing your own thing, don't follow leaders. But, if you have an idea, you do it and we'll follow you, kind of thing. And I think that was really empowering in the days when you listen to your heroes, before you don't have heroes anymore. So I picked a good one. I picked a hero that said, don't have heroes, go and do things. And that was a story that, I think impacted me. So in terms of now, like, it seems like my activism and my work are almost so closely related, because I'm so lucky to be working with like just diverse collection of people who often do things. For example, like, I have a whole bunch of different clients who work on diversity, for example, and diversity, they just came to me naturally. And diversity, that's a huge issue for me because it's an outgrowth of my lifetime work in anti-racism. That's come from when I was a kid, right? So now being able to take on contracts like that and support voices that are doing that work is literally activism. I mean, like, but I'm being paid for that, so that's not the activism part. But you see what I mean? Like, I'm luckily, I have this life where everything I care about is my work, is my life, is my, my friends and my clients. The clients, they hire me, friends hire me, they see what I do, and then then clients hire me, and I love what they do, and I don't, we become friends because I support what they do to one extent or another. I consider most of my clients my friends. That's how it ends up happening, because I care about what they do. You end up having that close relationship. You're coordinating together and strategizing together and celebrating together successes, and so.
So with regards to your clients, how do you select which ones you're actually going to promote? Because you're the person behind the scenes that's pushing them to all different types of media. So do they have to align to your values, and how do you sort of screen them to be able to know that that's the case?
For sure. That's a really good question. And I learned this year too that, I'm still getting my head around how do you really vet people, when something could surprise you later, as what happened with this year, right? So generally, yeah, I only take on things that I either really resonate with, like it's something I really love or care about, or I might just really resonate with that person. It could just be that, they're a really neat person or a cool person. They're building something, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have to be a cause. It could just be, I like that person. Yeah, I feel what they're doing. They're building their little thing, and so. But in terms of resonating, yeah, they definitely cannot. I mean, I'm very careful what I put out in the world, and I'll look at your socials, all that stuff, because the way I look at it, and this is just me, it's what I choose to put out in the world. If somebody is not using the platform they already have, social media, in a way that I'm supportive of, that they can put good things into the world, as opposed to a lot of negativity and anger and fear and whatever else, then I'm certainly not going to be the one that's going to give them a platform. I'm too good at what I do. I'm not going to elevate them for a dollar. I'm not going to take a contract that gives somebody a voice who's not using their platforms, in positive ways right now. So that's the only thing, is like, I want to make sure, I would definitely, if they're not aligned with, like, in terms of, like, if they're racist or those kind of things, absolutely. I would, if I found that out later, and I would return their money in a New York minute and we're done, right? absolutely, in a minute. So, but how do you vet that? So you know, I mean, I lived in a world where I assumed that we were all pretty much at that, that's how we thought, and that anybody who wasn't, I knew there was racist and all that all around us, but I assumed that we just didn't deal with that. We didn't like them. We didn't, but it was shocker last year, to see that a lot of like stuff that was right under the surface with a lot of people came out, people that I'd known for years, and I was shocked by some of the stuff they posted. In two cases, that was clients. One time, it was like they were just on the verge of having to renew, and I told them, there's sorry, you're not renewing, period. And then the other one was, it was over, and they were a client that comes back every once in a while, and I just made that unavailable. So I was lucky that it wasn't anybody right in the middle of something, but I don't ever want to have that happen, because it was nothing to do. I can defend myself. I have a history that nothing is going to stain me. It's not a matter of being stained by having associated with somebody that then comes out with something bad. I'm not worried about my reputation. My reputation in that is untouchable, because that's my whole life, right? But in terms of, me being, like, I personally being unhappy that I was ever associated with someone that I didn't see that could, yeah. So I'm trying to think of ways now that, how do you vet about everything? I mean, not, you obviously, I'm not trying to think my thoughts for my clients, but the basic ethical things that, I think are, obvious, like that we all should have equality and justice. And, if your message is contrary to that, then I can't be your publicist for sure. There's no.
And look, I think there's been a few PR nightmares, especially that, have come out over the past few years. People that, a lot of people looked up to and thought that they were, really quite moral. They ended up not being so. So what would your piece of advice be to, say, somebody starting out in PR who, I suppose, needs clients, on how they can sort of go about selecting them?
Yeah, I guess it all depends what your thing is. I mean, not everybody, like a lot of people, I don't know how like I said, I just built this myself. Like I've never really met other publicists. I've never really been to conferences where I hear how other publicists choose to take on clients, whatever. But I would say, especially in a public world, like right now, you're, huge. Your reputation is, especially as a publicist, you are putting your reputation behind this person specifically, right? Not just like you're working with them but you are literally elevating and celebrating their work. So you better make sure that you want to do that, and that, and a dollar you can spend no matter how much you need money, you're going to spend your grocery money and it's going to be gone next week. But the damage to your reputation could be forever, and you could literally end up having a very small career among very, small area of the population that is amenable to whatever your client is. So yeah, so be really careful. Think about, as a business and a brand, what do you want to be putting out there? And think about all the time when you're, elevating your own, you're building your own brand too with every client, even though your job is the client. As a PR company, you're very public in what you do, right? And so you're building a trail of who you are as a company by who you represent. And you can't get away from that, because your work is very public again, right? So just make sure that your values align with you're happy, in terms of you're going to be happy with that messaging. You're going to be proud, and also at an ethical level, if you don't love your client, if you're not super proud of your client, if you don't understand that message and you're not behind that message, you really shouldn't take on that project. So even beyond ethical problems or anything, like if I don't actually understand the if I don't feel it, if I'm not like, oh yes, oh I get that, man, that's a great idea, if that's not my reaction, then I'm not, it's not right. Because how am I going to be, if I don't have that enthusiasm and understanding, then I'm not going to understand them enough to be able to get their message out. I'm not going to know what the right audiences are. I'm not going to. So I think on an ethical level too, when you're building your brand, make sure you just really take on things that you care about and that you feel, because building your brand on that is going to build a stronger brand too.
So look, you definitely swim in your own lane, and I absolutely love that. And talking about, things that you feel very passionate about, I know that you have some experience with regards to medicinal cannabis and that pushing that agenda in Canada. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to speak to that, especially, to an Australian audience, because I know you guys are where we were a few years ago. Um, so I'm a medical cannabis patient, and I started, I discovered a long, long time ago, in the early, cannabis has been legal medically in Canada for over a decade, probably 11, at least 11 years, probably longer. In the early days, it was, very structured. You had to have one of these two illnesses. You had to go through the whole process with a doctor or a second doctor. I never bothered with it in all those days. I had found though through those, I wasn't working I just, in those days I wasn't a publicist yet. And, but I had learned myself for my nausea issues, just finding out on my own that actually that helped my nausea, just a little bit of cannabis. And then I could work for 15 hours, as opposed to doctors would give me all kinds of pills trying to figure out what was wrong with the gut. They didn't know, and nothing ever helped. And I was always, like feeling impaired in the workplace, meaning feeling sick, feeling like I couldn't focus, and because I was going to be sick. So we had, finally, cannabis was my solution for that. But I continued to go to doctors trying to find out what it is, because it's great that I have an answer that makes me feel better. But what is it? When you present with nausea, it can be anything or nothing. It's like saying I have a headache. So now we're finding out some medical issues that I may have had back then. Like I knew would happen someday. We'll see what it was. You know what I mean? Now that
Yeah.
I'm older. But anyway, that's my personal story. So I was, talking to people who are actively working in the early medical cannabis industry in Canada, and advocates and all that. So it became, really fully understanding of the work that was being done, the kind of advocacy, who they were helping. Heard a lot of patient stories, heard a lot of, just deep, deep into that world. And then that sort of coincided with my early days as a publicist. So people in that world would see what I was doing, and some asked me to come and do some of their messaging. So there was a book, there was an early a doctor who's an emergency room doctor, well respected in Canada. He's also he does sports medicine with some of the biggest teams, also works in 2 emergency rooms, and now he's a coroner. He was one of our first Canadian, yeah, I know, now I'm like, when do you sleep? But he was one of our first Canadian so-called cannabis doctors. Like he said, he didn't like that kind of calling him that, because he's like, we practice medicine here. If someone came in and said, hey, I'd like a prescription of 2 grams, he'd be like, again, we practice medicine here. You tell me what the thing is. I'm the doctor. We'll all look to see if I think that's a appropriate treatment, potentially, So he's very, not like, and so that was my early work. I did a lot of work with, people who were actually in medical advocacy, and, and then that was about 5 years before the conversation changed with Justin Trudeau coming in and saying, legalizing coast to coast for adult use or recreational use, which we've now got, in Canada. So now here we are 2 years in, 2 years and 4 months in. The government actually sell it. The government has stores where we buy our weed from the government. Like there's actually, and they sell these pens. There's this, I don't know if you can see it on here, but this is legal, and this is like the same kind of, when cigarettes are duty free, duty cigarettes. So this is the mark for duty, and it's like the little teeny thing. It says THC, and this is a government. This is a pen bought at a government store, Ontario cannabis store, and so they sell hash, they sell cannabis, they sell oil, they sell edibles. Edibles are very low dose with the government stores, but so yes, and here we are 2.5 years into legal adult use recreational cannabis, and like I said on the anniversary, first year anniversary, show me the bodies. Where are the bodies?
Yeah.
Where are the body reports? Where is the hospital thing? Where are the car accidents we were promised? Where's all that reefer madness stuff? Canada's doing great, and I'm proud of Canada, because we're now a light and a guide to the world. That they're looking at the rollout. There's some issues with the rollout. Like activists will say, "Oh, they did this wrong. It's too corporate," and but I mean, everything's a learning curve. There's always going to be some. We're educating governments that have been propagandized for 100 years, and now they're starting to come in, listen to medical experts, looking at risk analysis, looking at all that. But Canada is, and when I go to conferences around the world, medical and such, Canada now, we're really looked at like as a outlier, as a light. How are we gonna, I think the whole world is going to be going this way, just a matter of how. And I think we're showing at 2.5 years in, like, again, we're still Canada. We're, all those people who were scared, all the NIMBY people, there were a bunch, all the back, there's no difference. I don't see people, I don't even see people out there smoking on the streets very often anymore than I used to. Not even much of a difference. The people that used to smoke on the streets, of which I was one of them once in a while, even before legal day, they still smoke on the streets. And we, like we always did, if we see a group of people or some kids coming, or, we move aside or we move around or go away, because that's just polite. same as we ever did, you know. So I don't, you don't see so if you were like a non-cannabis person worried about what's going to happen, the only difference is, and it's funny because it's come on, is, you know, for example, now it's legal, so say share an apartment building, you might not like the smell. Well, you know what's happened here is, since legalization, actually there's become way more rules about cannabis. In the old days, there was no rules saying you couldn't smoke cannabis in your apartment. It was just illegal, right? So
Yeah.
it went without saying. But now that it is legal, most apartments and condos, or quite a few of them, originally, a lot of it's changing now because people are advocating, but a lot of it was like they put in no, because, you know, you have no smoking apartments. Well, they put in, now cannabis is included in that. So people are like, wait a minute, I was always able to before, but now it's a specific rule against. Wait a minute, you know, so some weirdness like that, where like legalization has actually led to more structure, which is, which if you're a NIMBY person, if you look at it, legalization has actually led to now rules that people can't smoke in their condos. You
Yeah.
know, because now there's a legal thing, so now we can address that legal thing and what are our particular rules about it as consumers, right? So yeah, not, you know, and I know, just so there's all that fear, all that like whatever. We, again, we're 2.5 years in. There's nothing, there's nobody that's pointed to nobody, not even the conservatives. No, like, there's nobody that's pointing to, there's no statistics, there's nothing that's changed. We're just still the same, because most people who smoke cannabis still smoke cannabis. Some people who didn't, the people that didn't smoke before that choose to smoke now because it's legal, if you think about it, those are going to be really responsible people, because they chose not to because it was illegal. And so if they're choosing now to smoke because it's legal, you think all of a sudden they're going to go throw everything to the wind and be just big potheads now? No. If anything, you're seeing them maybe smoking on the weekend, or, you know, hey, honey, let's go for our anniversary and go to the government store and get ourselves a gram. You know, like, it's that kind of, you know what I mean? Because if they weren't smoking before, like, it's not the crazy people that are going to be like, woohoo, now it's legal, now we can do it. It's the legal people. It's the people that, so what you're seeing is the increase in youth. We're getting a lot of older people now looking at it as medicine, who even in 10 years of legalization of medically, they weren't comfortable going to their doctor talking about it because there was still that stigma. But literally the day before legalization, I heard from friends in government, in city council, a woman who's a police officer, who were all telling me, oh, now I can try, I'm looking forward to trying it now, you make it look so relaxing. So you think those people are going to go and be no, they're going to, you know what I mean? So there's no fear, but the people who smoke continue to smoke. If anything, you take away from the black market, which we call the legacy market now, because the black market wasn't always bad guys. What they call the black market, some of it was, I mean, there's always bad guys there in there too. But there were a lot of them. What they call the black market was the legacy market, the people that were advocating for the legalization, for medical legalization, you know, and they're trying to get into the legal market now. But all of a sudden, the big corporate guys have come in, and it's bankers and lawyers and candlestick makers, and 98% of the Canadian cannabis industry boardrooms now, and we're talking like corporate here, is white men. And meanwhile, the cannabis industry in Canada a lot of it was built on strong, powerful women in health, and, you know, and yet 98%. So we have a lot of work to do. We're looking at things like that now. Like, forget about the old story about, is it a big, no, it's business. It's not a harmful, it's less harmful than a million other things. And it's bringing huge industry, you know, taxation, you know, whatever. And people, apparently workers' comp. I saw recently a stat of it was Canadian or American. It was either in American states or in Canada where it was legal. They were saying workers' comp thing has gone down.
Wow.
Like, stuff like that. So like, it's having all, you know, from a medical perspective, people are moving away from big pharma, where people in cannabis are doing a lot of work, not the corporate guys, but the advocates, to get people off of, you know, the opiates are an insane crisis, killing people all over the country, you know, internationally, right? So that's why my client, Dr. Ira Price, originally, you know, the emergency room doctor / coroner, originally became a cannabis advocate, is because he's a coroner and a doctor. He was seeing what killed people. He says most people present to the hospital for pain, and then they get opiates, and then they get addicted and they die. And then he started experimenting with cannabis, getting 60% of people off opiates using just cannabis plant medicine. Yeah, and they don't die. So that's why he was like, you know, don't call me a cannabis doctor. I'm a doctor. I'm an emergency room doctor. I'm a coroner. I'm science-based. I don't want to see people die. They're coming.
Yeah, he's saving lives.
Pain, you know. So that's their. what we don't hear, because we're all, it was all stigma for so long and a misunderstanding. And unfortunately, a lot of times the media put the camera in front of the idiot guy with the, hey, happy 420 and the beard. And, idiocy is all that we saw. The Mark Emerys of the world, no, these jokers, and not serious advocates, which in the last 10 years, we've started to see serious advocates get a voice.
So the stigma is obviously reducing over there, but what are you going to do, Tracy, with regards to sort of campaigning for equality in those boardrooms?
Yeah, we're talking. That's something. It's funny because literally every day in my work and in my activist, both I've been talking. Today I had 2 conversations about that. One with a woman in cannabis, not selling the product, but she's a company called High B&B, a new company, strong female leader, going to take on Airbnb for the cannabis market. And we were just talking about that, writing an article in financial press addressing that, and then same, I work with Afro-Canada Bud Sisters, who are African-American Canadians, who talk about the lack of, there's the women, and then there's the lack of, those are both insane, like, just, that is not Canada, and is not our cannabis community. So we need to address that and to take that down. And then I have another client who's setting up a boardroom right now for a big corporate cannabis company. And I said to him, the first thing I said to him, I said, no, I'm looking at you. You just sent me your thing, and there's like 4, again, you're a nice white guy and your 3 friends are nice white guys, but I'm seeing you're getting into, and he never even thought about it. He's like, oh yeah, I know. I go, no, you don't know. Because right now this is actually being discussed. I can Google 4 articles about how 98% of the boardrooms are white men, and you're putting together a brand new cannabis company. You just can't do that. And I don't want you to do that. So find a better solution. And he's like, can you suggest anything? I'm like, I certainly can. I've been in the industry for 10 years. Let me give you some strong women to talk to, and you'll be lucky if they if you talk to you, but you need to, because, and they're not thinking about it. They're not trying to be exclusive. That's just the people that they know. And they don't, they need to start thinking about this because it matters.
Absolutely. And I think, if anybody's sort of going to turn the tide on that sort of inequality, especially in this space, it's going to be you, Tracy. You just had such an amazing life, and it's just so interesting to me all the facets that you've sort of gone through.
I
but
know,
I do have.
I don't even know how I've lived like it.
It is. It's absolutely crazy, and you've had so many parts of your life intersect to sort of put you on the trajectory that you are of, success and helping other people. But I do have a question for you, Tracy. What would you do differently if only you knew?
You know what? I would have started this business thing. I would have a lot earlier. Like I think it's unfortunate that we don't learn. I'm glad I did what I did, because like if it was a choice, one or the other, no question, I'm glad I went the way I did. But it didn't have to be a choice. And I realize now, if I had understood business a little bit more, instead of, because all those years I had a full-time job and I was putting all my day, efforts in my day job, selling crap for other people that I didn't care about or whatever. If I had in those hours built, a company like I did 10 years later, and started to get the successes that I'm having now, like on a financial level, instead of, always just, never thinking anything beyond being that struggling activist, doing good things because money was a bad thing. I don't think about it or care about it. Then I would have been way more powerful. And because now I see the platforms that I have now, the people that listen to me now. I always got hurt. I was on CNN, NMSC, blah blah blah, right? But it's funny when certain people will never listen to you as an activist. Certain people will never listen to you as an advocate. They don't care about this. They don't care about that. But when you're on a stage talking about, then you tell them how to build their business, and they know you're a success, and you're talking about business stuff. Now I have a whole different audience. It's really interesting. And when they ask me that question, how did you get into PR? Like, I've been doing hundreds of business, like hard business themed podcasts, and I explain that story. You can just see that, like, and I can see that they're in getting into the story, though, but they don't hear that stuff. They don't normally hear it from people that they're like listening to, And I'm seeing that I'm reaching audiences that I could never have reached before too. So like, it's interesting. So I guess in a way, I wouldn't have changed anything, because where I can't argue with where I am and what I've done. Like, I can't. But I wish, not I wish, but if I had, the lesson I would give myself back then is that, you can actually stop, actually be an entrepreneur. Think about business too. It's not a bad thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, I didn't take business people seriously. If you want to talk about that, like, I'm an activist, they're in business, whatever. If I had merged those things at 30 instead of at 50, I would have been like super powerful. I would have been 40 guys from death row by now.
Look, you've done way more than most people, Tracy. And, I hope that this podcast gives you another new audience and to get your message out and to help with all the great work that you're doing. So
Thank you so
thank
much.
you. Thank you so much for joining me today. And if you'd like to know more about Tracy, I'll have links to all of her details on my website, ifonlyyouKnewpodcast.com.au. Thanks, Tracy.
Thank you.
Thank you.